Before we dive into today's topic, I want to tell you about something that's changed how I approach pigeon health and performance. I run another channel called Pigeon Healthy where I share natural herbal treatment methods that most fanciers have never heard of. We're talking about plants and natural remedies that have powerful healing and performance-enhancing effects on pigeons. Things like specific herb combinations that boost immunity, natural treatments for respiratory diseases, plants that improve digestion and recovery after races, and natural alternatives to chemical medications. We cover pigeon diseases you might be struggling with right now: canker, respiratory infections, coccidiosis, worms, and show you exactly how to treat them using natural methods that actually work. No guessing, no expensive medications with side effects. Just proven herbal protocols used by top European lofts. If you're serious about keeping your birds healthy naturally and improving their performance without chemicals, go subscribe to Pigeon Healthy right now. The knowledge there could save you birds, save you money, and give you an edge your competition doesn't have. Now let's get into today's topic. It's January, middle of winter, cold, short days, occasional snow. Your racing season ended 3 months ago. Your birds are resting, molting finished, recovering from the demands of the previous season. You're feeding them well, high-quality mixed grain you purchased from a reputable supplier. The bag says Racing Pigeon Mix and lists various grains. It looks good. The birds eat it eagerly. Everything seems fine. But when you handle birds to check condition, they feel lighter than they should. Muscle tone over the keel is reduced. Some birds show slightly dull feathers. Energy during loft flying is lower than you remember from racing season. You're concerned. Are the birds sick? Are they not recovering properly from last season? Should you be supplementing, adding vitamins, changing something? Then racing season arrives. You've been feeding the same mix through winter because it's quality feed and birds seem to do well on it. But the first race results are disappointing. Birds return looking more exhausted than you expected for the distance. Recovery takes longer than it should. Performance doesn't match the level you saw at end of last season, when birds were in peak form. What changed? The birds are the same. The training progression was appropriate. Why are they underperforming? The answer in both scenarios is likely the same. You're feeding the wrong mix for the season and situation. The racing pigeon mix that seems fine year-round is actually optimized for active racing, not for winter rest or transition period. Feeding the same mix year-round means birds are either undernourished in winter when they need different nutrients, or overfed inappropriate nutrients during racing when they need specific performance support. This is one of the most common and most costly mistakes in pigeon management. Fanciers buy one type of feed, maybe switching brands occasionally, but always buying racing mix, and feed it continuously regardless of season, activity level, or physiological demand. They think consistency in feeding is important, which is partly true, but they miss that consistency must be consistency within phases, not rigidity across all phases. Birds in winter rest have completely different nutritional needs than birds in active racing. Birds molting need different nutrition than birds not molting. Birds breeding need different nutrition than birds resting. Using one feed mix for all phases means you're always either under-meeting or over-meeting some nutritional requirement. You're never optimizing for the specific phase the bird is in. Top fanciers adjust feeding systematically based on what birds are doing physiologically at each time of year. Heremans quote, "In winter I feed for feathers. In racing season I feed for legs," captures this perfectly. Winter feeding supports feather quality, immune function, and body condition maintenance during rest and cold weather. Racing season feeding supports muscle function, energy generation, and rapid recovery. Different goals require different nutrition. Today we're covering the complete year-round feeding strategy used by championship fanciers, including the specific mixes for winter rest phase, the transition protocol as racing season approaches, the racing season active mix, and the critical mistakes that most fanciers make in feeding management. By the end, you'll understand exactly what to feed when, how to transition between phases, and why getting this right makes substantial difference in bird health and performance. Let's start with understanding the physiological demands of winter and why winter feeding must differ from racing season feeding. Winter, roughly November through February in Northern Hemisphere, is when birds should be resting from racing demands. Breeding season has ended. Molt is complete or finishing. Racing won't resume for months. This is recovery and maintenance phase. The physiological demands during winter are maintaining body temperature in cold weather, which requires more calories than moderate weather, maintaining immune function to resist diseases that spread more easily in cold, confined conditions, Maintaining feather quality after molt is complete. Ensuring feathers are fully developed with good oils. Maintaining body condition and weight without creating excess fat that would need to be removed before racing. Additionally, birds are largely inactive compared to racing season. They're not training. They're not racing. Daily energy expenditure is much lower. They need adequate nutrition but not the high-energy racing ration that would create unwanted weight gain. The optimal winter mix must provide concentrated energy for cold weather thermoregulation, healthy fats for feather quality and skin health, moderate protein for maintenance without excess that would be wasted, and variety to provide full spectrum of vitamins and minerals. The mix should be calorie-dense enough to maintain condition but not so energy-rich that inactive birds become overweight. The specific grain composition that achieves this is high in oil-rich seeds and moderate in protein grain. Here's the winter mix used by many championship lofts. Winter mix composition: 30% safflower seed, 20% sunflower seed, 15% hemp seed, 15% peas, 10% wheat, 10% dairy or millet. Let's examine why each component serves winter needs. Safflower and sunflower are oil-rich seeds providing concentrated energy and healthy fats. The oils support feather quality, creating the slight sheen you want to see in well-maintained feathers. They provide calories for thermoregulation without requiring birds to consume large volumes of food. They also contain vitamin E and other fat-soluble vitamins important for immune function. Hemp seed is extraordinary for winter feeding. It's very high in oil, providing concentrated energy. It contains perfect balance of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids that support anti-inflammatory processes, immune function, and overall health. Hemp also provides high-quality protein with all essential amino acids. Birds love hemp and eat it eagerly. It's expensive relative to other feeds, but winter is when hemp's benefits are most valuable. Peas provide protein for maintaining muscle mass during rest period. The protein content doesn't need to be as high as during racing, but adequate protein prevents muscle waste. Peas also provide complex carbohydrates for energy. Wheat and dairy millet provide easily digestible carbohydrates for energy without excessive calories. They balance the oil-rich seeds with lighter grains that support digestive health. This mix is approximately 35 to 40% oil-rich seeds, much higher than racing mixes. The high oil content provides the concentrated energy and fat-soluble nutrients that support winter maintenance without requiring excessive feed volume. Feed quantity in winter should be moderate. Birds are less active, so they need fewer total calories than during racing. Provide enough that birds maintain good body weight and condition, but not so much that they become fat. As rough guideline, 25 to 30 grams per bird per day might be appropriate, but this varies with bird size, loft temperature, and individual metabolism. Monitor body condition and adjust quantity based on observation. The bird should feel solid with good muscle over the keel and slight fat reserve that provides insulation and energy buffer. They shouldn't feel bony and thin, indicating underfeeding. They shouldn't feel heavy and overly rounded, indicating overfeeding. Optimal winter condition is solid, well covered, but not fat. Now let's discuss feeding during molt, because molt overlaps with late summer and fall, distinct from both winter rest and racing season. Molt is extraordinarily demanding physiologically. Growing new feathers requires tremendous amounts of protein, amino acids, minerals, especially calcium and sulfur, and energy. Poor nutrition during molt results in poor feather quality that persists until next molt. During heavy molt, which for most birds is July through October, increase protein content of the feed and ensure adequate minerals. The molt mix should be 25% peas or beans, 20% wheat, 20% barley, 15% safflower, 10% hemp seed, 10% dairy or millet. This mix is higher in protein than winter mix, supporting feather synthesis. Additionally, provide supplemental minerals during molt. Grit should always be available, but especially during molt. Consider adding mineral supplement or small amounts of specific mineral-rich feeds. Some fanciers add linseed meal, brewer's yeast, or commercial molt supplements. The goal is supporting the intense feather synthesis without nutritional limitations. Feed quantity during molt can be slightly higher than winter because the metabolic demands of feather growth require significant energy. Birds that finish molt in good feather condition with full complete plumage enter winter and subsequent racing season with advantage. Birds that molt poorly due to inadequate nutrition show deficits that affect them through the entire next year. Now let's discuss the transition from winter feeding to racing season feeding. This transition is critical and where many fanciers make serious mistakes. The mistake is switching abruptly from winter mix to racing mix with no transition period. This sudden change in feed composition causes digestive stress, temporary reduction in performance, and potential for birds to reject the new feed. The correct approach is gradual transition over 5 to 7 days, slowly changing the proportions of winter mix and racing mix, so birds' digestive systems adapt to the new feed composition. Here's the day-by-day transition protocol starting approximately 2 to 3 weeks before first race. Day 1 of transition, feed 75% winter mix and 25% racing mix, mix thoroughly. Birds eat this combined mix, experiencing the new grains but still mostly eating familiar winter mix. Digestive system begins adapting to different grain type. Day 2 through 3, feed 50% winter mix and 50% racing mix. The proportions are now equal. Birds are eating substantial amounts of the new racing mix, while still having familiar winter grains available. Day 4 through 5, feed 25% winter mix and 75% racing mix. Birds are now mostly on racing mix, with only small amount of familiar winter mix remaining. Day 6 through 7, feed 100% racing mix with no winter mix. Transition is complete. Birds are fully adapted to the new feed. This gradual transition prevents digestive upset and allows birds to adapt to the different energy profile and grain composition without stress. Some birds resist feed changes and might eat less during transition. Monitor that all birds are eating adequately. If any bird shows signs of not eating or losing condition, you might need slower transition, or you might need to adjust the mixes to be more similar during transition. Now let's discuss the racing season mix composition and why it differs dramatically from winter mix. Racing season, roughly March through September in Northern Hemisphere, is when birds are training and racing regularly. The physiological demands are high-intensity muscle work during races, rapid recovery between races, maintaining lean racing weight without excess body fat, supporting immune function under racing stress, and providing quick access energy for explosive starts in sustained high-speed flight. The racing mix must provide high-quality protein for muscle maintenance and repair, easily digestible carbohydrates for rapid energy availability, moderate fat for sustained energy without digestive heaviness, and minerals and vitamins for recovery and immune support. The specific composition that achieves this is much lower in oil-rich seeds and higher in protein and easily digestible carbohydrate. Here's the standard racing season mix used by top lofts. Racing mix composition: 30% peas or beans, 25% wheat, 20% barley, 10% barzing or millet, 10% corn, 5% safflower, 5% linseed flaxseed, 5% hemp seed. Let's examine why each component serves racing needs. Peas and beans are primary protein source, providing the amino acids needed for muscle repair after races. The protein content of racing mix is much higher than winter mix, supporting intense muscle work and recovery. Use smaller pea varieties like maple peas, which digest more easily than large field peas. Wheat and barley are easily digestible carbohydrates that provide energy without sitting heavily in the digestive system. They convert relatively quickly to glucose and glycogen, supporting racing energy needs. They're lighter than corn and more appropriate for racing where you want birds flying with clean, efficient digestion. Barley and millet are small, easily digestible grains that provide carbohydrates without heavy digestive load. They're particularly good for younger birds or for feeding shortly before races when you want very light, easily processed grain. Corn provides more concentrated energy than wheat or barley. Small amounts of corn are appropriate in racing mix, but not large amounts. Too much corn creates heavy digestive load and can lead to birds carrying excess weight. 10% is moderate inclusion that provides benefits without drawbacks. Safflower is included in small amount for some oil and fat-soluble vitamins, but much less than in winter mix. The oil content of racing mix is much lower than winter mix, because high oil creates slower digestion and heavier feeling that impairs racing performance. Linseed flaxseed is included for its omega-3 fatty acids that have anti-inflammatory properties supporting recovery after race. 5% inclusion provides these benefits without excessive oil content. As discussed in previous videos, linseed can be increased to 10 to 15% in the days immediately before important races for extra anti-inflammatory support. Hemp seed is included in small amount for its nutritional benefits, but not the large amount used in winter. Racing birds don't need as much oil as winter birds, so hemp is reduced proportional. This racing mix is approximately 65% protein and carbohydrate grains and only 15% oil-rich seeds, compared to winter mix, which is 55% oil-rich seeds. The compositions are dramatically different because the purposes are different. Feed quantity during racing season varies based on training and racing schedule. During heavy training weeks, birds need substantial calories. Provide 30 to 40 grams per bird per day, or even more if birds are in very heavy training. During race weeks, quantity might be reduced slightly following the 7-day conditioning protocol discussed previously. But in general, active racing birds need more total calories than winter rest birds, though from different grain composition. Now let's discuss the critical mistake of feeding high-oil mixes during racing season. This is surprisingly common and seriously impairs performance. Some fanciers continue feeding winter-style mixes or commercial mixes that are very high in sunflower, safflower, and other oil-rich seeds through racing season because they think the high energy content supports racing. The problem is oil digests slowly compared to carbohydrate. Oil-rich feed creates heavy feeling in the digestive system. Birds feel sluggish. Their crop stays full longer. Digestion takes more time and energy. This is acceptable or even desirable during winter rest when you want concentrated energy that sustains birds for long periods. It's terrible during racing when you want clean, efficient digestion that provides energy without weight or sluggishness. Birds racing on high oil feeds often underperform their genetic potential. They carry heavier crops. They fly with digestive discomfort. Their race positions suffer not because of poor fitness or navigation, but because they're racing with inappropriate nutrition that creates physiological disadvantage. If you're currently feeding high oil mix during racing season and wondering why performance is below expectations, this might be the cause. Transition to proper racing mix with high protein and easily digestible carbohydrates, low oil. Observe whether performance improves over the following weeks as birds adapt to the appropriate racing nutrition. Now let's discuss fine-tuning the racing mix for specific race distances. The standard racing mix works well for general sprint and middle distance racing up to approximately 300 kilometers. For longer distances, some modifications can be beneficial. For long-distance racing 500 kilometers and beyond, increase the corn content slightly and reduce durum millet. Corn provides more sustained energy over many hours. The racing mix for long distance might be 30% peas, 20% wheat, 15% barley, 15% corn, 10% durum, 5% safflower, 5% linseed. The higher corn content supports the sustained energy needs of long flights. For sprint racing 100 kilometers and shorter, decrease corn and increase durum millet and wheat. The ultralight, easily digestible grains support explosive fast starts. The sprint mix might be 30% peas, 30% wheat, 15% barley, 15% durum millet, 5% corn, 5% linseed, very little corn, very high proportion of light fast-digesting grains. These modifications are optional refinements. The standard racing mix works adequately for all distances, but if you specialize in specific distance range, tailoring the mix can provide marginal additional benefit. Now let's discuss feeding during breeding season. Because breeding overlaps with late winter and early spring, bridging rest phase and racing phase, breeding is metabolically demanding, especially for hens producing eggs. The breeding mix needs higher protein and calcium than rest mix, but not as performance-oriented as racing mix. Breeding mix composition: 30% peas, 20% wheat, 15% barley, 15% safflower, 10% hemp seed, 10% durum or millet. This mix is high in protein for egg production and chick feeding. It's moderate in oil to support the energy demands of breeding without excess. Add calcium supplementation through grit, cuttlebone, or crushed oyster shell. Breeding hens need substantial calcium for egg shell formation. Feed quantity during breeding should be generous. Provide feed-free choice, so birds eat to appetite. Breeding pairs feeding chicks consume remarkable amounts of feed. Don't restrict feed during breeding or you risk poor chick development and parent birds losing condition. Continue breeding mix through the raising period until chicks are weaned, then transition to racing mix if racing season is starting, or back to winter mix if breeding season ends and racing season hasn't begun. Now let's discuss feed quality and storage, because even correct mix composition doesn't support optimal performance. If feed quality is poor, feed quality degrades through improper storage. Oils in seeds become rancid. Vitamins deteriorate. Mold grows if moisture is present. Insects infest stored feed. Purchase feed from reputable suppliers with high turnover, ensuring feed is fresh. Avoid purchasing enormous quantities that will sit in storage for months. Buy amounts you'll use within 4 to 8 weeks. For small lofts, buy monthly. For large lofts, buy every 2 to 3 weeks. Store feed in cool, dry location protected from moisture, insects, and rodents. Use sealed containers, not bags that can be chewed through. Metal or heavy plastic bins with tight lids work well. Don't store feed in locations that get very hot, like sheds in direct sun, because heat accelerates oil rancidity and nutrient degradation. Check stored feed regularly for any signs of mold, insects, or off odors. If feed smells musty, rancid, or unusual, discard it. Don't feed suspect feed to valuable birds. Fresh quality feed supports health and performance. Poor quality feed impairs both. Now let's discuss water management in relation to feeding, because water is equally important as feed for proper nutrition. Birds' feed dry grain needs substantial water for digestion. Inadequate water intake causes digestive stress and prevents birds from utilizing feed nutrients properly. Ensure water is clean and available at all times. Change water daily, minimum twice daily if possible. Dirty water reduces intake. Birds drinking less than optimal water amounts show reduced feed intake and poor condition. Water quality and supplementation strategies have been discussed in previous videos. The principles remain the same year-round. Lightly mineralized water supports general health. Electrolyte water supports recovery after races. Clean, fresh water is always priority. Now let's discuss the economics of feeding strategies, because some fanciers resist feeding different mixes, thinking it's more expensive. The cost analysis shows proper feeding is actually economical. Winter mix with high oil seed content is more expensive per kilogram than racing mix with more grain and less oil seed. But birds eat less volume of winter mix because oil is energy dense. Total cost per bird over winter might be similar to or less than feeding inappropriate racing mix in large quantities. Racing mix is somewhat less expensive per kilogram than winter mix. Birds eat larger quantities during racing season due to higher activity level. Total cost is higher during racing season, but this is appropriate because you're racing and presumably generating some income or satisfaction from the sport that justifies the cost. Breeding mix falls between winter and racing in cost. Total cost is highest during breeding because you're feeding parents plus growing chicks, but this phase is relatively short, 6 to 8 weeks. So annual impact is manageable. The alternative, feeding one mix year-round, seems economical because you buy in bulk and don't manage transition, but it's false economy. Birds fed inappropriate nutrition underperform, become sick more frequently, require more supplements and medications, and generate poor racing results. The cost of suboptimal feeding far exceeds any savings from simplicity. Proper feeding appropriate to season and demands is investment that pays returns in bird health, performance, and reduced medical costs. It's not expensive, it's economical, when properly understood. Now let's discuss how to implement this feeding strategy starting from wherever you currently are. If you're currently feeding one mix year-round, here's how to transition to systematic seasonal feeding. Assess current season and bird activity. If it's winter and birds are resting, transition over next week from current mix to proper winter mix. Use the gradual transition protocol, mixing increasing proportions of winter mix with decreasing proportions of current mix over 5 to 7 days. If it's early spring and racing season is approaching, transition to racing mix using the same gradual protocol. If birds are breeding, transition to breeding mix. Match the feed to what birds are actually doing right now. Physiologically, purchase small quantities of new mixes. Initially, don't buy 6 months supply until you've verified birds eat the new mix well and show good condition on it. Test for 1 to 2 months, then commit to larger quantities if results are positive. Monitor bird condition closely during and after transitions. Weigh birds if possible. Observe feather quality, energy level, appetite, droppings. Ensure the new feeding strategy is providing expected benefits. If birds aren't thriving on the new mix, adjust composition based on their response. Keep notes about feeding timing, mixes used, quantities, and bird condition. Next year, use these notes to refine your feeding program. Over several years, you'll develop feeding strategy that's optimized for your specific birds, climate, racing schedule, and loft conditions. Now let's discuss common questions in problem solving. Question: What if I can't source specific grains mentioned in the mixes? Substitute similar grain. If safflower isn't available, use sunflower. If hemp isn't available, use more linseed and sunflower. The exact grains matter less than the overall proportions of oil-rich seeds, protein grains, and easily digestible carbohydrates. Match the nutritional profile, even if specific grains differ. Question: can I feed commercial pre-mixed feeds instead of mixing my own? Yes, if you can find commercial mixes that match the appropriate profiles for each season. Some suppliers offer different mixes for winter, breeding, and racing. Use those if composition is appropriate. But many commercial racing pigeon mix feeds are generic compromises that don't optimize for any specific phase. Read labels carefully. Don't assume commercial mix is appropriate just because it's marketed for pigeon. Question: how do I know if birds are getting proper nutrition on current feeding? Primary indicators are body condition appropriate to season, good feather quality, especially after molt, consistent energy and activity level, good appetite without gorging or refusing feed, firm well-formed droppings, strong immune function with minimal illness. If birds show all these, nutrition is adequate. If any indicators are poor, nutrition might need adjustment. Question: what about supplements, vitamins, minerals beyond what's in feed? Supplements can be valuable in specific situations. During molt, mineral supplementation supports feather growth. Before and after races, vitamin supplementation might support recovery, but supplements are additions to proper base diet, not replacements for poor base diet. Get the base feeding right first, then add strategic supplements if needed for specific demand. Question: should I feed differently for young birds versus adult birds? Young birds in growth phase need higher protein than adults. If you're raising young birds, increase P content or add protein supplement. Otherwise, young birds on standard racing mix do well. Adjust quantity based on their needs. Growing birds eat more relative to body weight than adults. Now let's discuss the championship perspective on feeding, because top fanciers universally adjust feeding seasonally and strategically. Leo Heremans' distinction between feeding for feathers in winter and feeding for legs in racing season encapsulates the philosophy. Winter feeding supports maintenance of bird quality. Racing feeding supports performance. Different goals, different feed. Heremans adjusted feed composition multiple times per year. He didn't feed one mix hoping it covered all situations. He fed deliberately for each physiological phase. This wasn't complicated or obsessive. It was recognition that nutrition must match demand. Louis van der Velde's similarly practiced systematic seasonal feeding, with transitions between phases. His birds maintained excellent condition year-round because nutrition was always appropriate to what they were doing. They entered racing season already optimized, not requiring weeks of conditioning to shift from inappropriate winter feeding. These championship approaches created birds that were always in appropriate condition for current demands, not trying to adapt from mismatch between nutrition and activity. The feeding strategies weren't secret formulas. They were application of basic nutritional principles matched to birds' actual needs through the year. You can apply the same systematic approach. You can stop feeding one mix and hoping it works for everything. You can feed strategically for winter maintenance, breeding production, racing performance, molt support. You can transition gradually between phases. You can monitor and adjust based on birds' response. The result is birds that maintain excellent condition year-round, that enter racing season in optimal condition rather than requiring long conditioning period, that perform at genetic potential because nutrition supports rather than limits performance. The feeding strategy is clear. Winter 30% safflower, 20% sunflower, 15% hemp, 15% peas, 10% wheat, 10% dairy. High oil for maintenance in cold weather. Racing, 30% peas, 25% wheat, 20% barley, 10% dairy, 10% corn, 15% mixed seeds. High protein and easy carbohydrates for performance. Breeding, 30% peas, 20% wheat, 15% barley, 15% safflower, 10% hemp, 10% dairy. High protein and moderate oil for reproduction. Molt, 25% peas, 20% wheat, 20% barley, 15% safflower, 10% hemp, 10% dairy. High protein for feather synthesis. Transition gradually over 5 to 7 days when changing between phases. Monitor condition continuously. Adjust quantities and minor compositions based on individual bird response and specific conditions. Feed quality grains from fresh stock stored properly. Provide clean, fresh water, always. Supplement strategically for specific high-demand periods. This is complete systematic feeding strategy that supports optimal bird health and performance through every phase of the year. It's not complicated. It requires some thought and planning, but the investment in proper feeding returns enormous benefits in bird condition, performance, and reduced health problems. Your birds can only perform as well as their nutrition allows. Feed them appropriately for what they're doing right now. Stop feeding the same mix, hoping it covers winter rest and racing performance. It doesn't. Match nutrition to demands. Watch your birds maintain better condition and perform better in races because they're fueled properly. One mix doesn't fit all season. Different phases require different nutrition. Feed strategically, transition properly, monitor results, and give your birds the nutritional foundation they need to express their genetic potential fully. That's how champions feed. That's how you should feed. Systematic, seasonal, strategic. Feed for feathers. In winter, feed for legs. In racing season, feed appropriately always. And watch your program transform through this simple but powerful optimization. The feed mix matters. The timing matters. The transitions matter. Get them right and everything else works better. Get them wrong and even the best birds underperform. Choose to feed right. Your birds will thank you with health and performance. That proves proper feeding is foundation of all success.